Call the meeting to order. Roll, please.
Mr. Hartnett?
Present.
Mr. Porter?
Present.
Mr. Bonner?
Present.
Mrs. Corzine?
Present.
Mr. Dennis?
Present.
This meeting is being audio recorded. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll, please.
Mr. Hartnett?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Bonner?
Yes.
Mrs. Corzine?
Yes.
Mr. Dennis?
Yes.
Treasurer recommendations.
Okay.
Deb.
Well, let's start out with the five-year forecast presentation. If you look up here, I also have some handouts, which this is just the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll look at the other two handouts I have toward the end. Good. Okay, I think you guys have heard me talk about Cup Patterson several times. It finally went into play. It's not called Cup Patterson, though. It's called the Fair School Funding Plan. It's similar to it. I think there was a few things that were tweaked, and they called it something different. Funding is now based on cost methodology, and that means that who is here sitting in our seats, students, is who we're going to get funded for. So there's no flow-through at this point any longer. The base cost is currently calculated for 2 years using the state average for historical actual data. So what we're getting funded for is really based on 19's numbers. So it's not actually fully funded in yet. The next biennial budget, it will be. So hopefully it will be a positive for us. I did not reflect that because I don't have a clue until the next biennial budget. And this is the first year of the budget. What has changed? What's changed with the new formula? Revenue, you're going to see some big changes. Starting this year, Ohio will use district educated enrollment, which is comprised of resident students attending and open enrollment in students. For fiscal year 22, the district is forecasting a decrease in revenue of 4.9 million. So the forecast, when we go to look at it, it's going to look horrible. But on the flip side, the expenses, tuition expenses are not flowing through anymore. Open enrollment's not coming through. You can see here, scholarships are not coming through. Community schools are not coming through. STEM is not coming through. So that reduces our expenses by 5 million. So we're kind of a wash, I would say. 4.9 to 5 million is pretty close to being a wash. But I wanted you to be able to see how the forecast is going to change tremendously. Let's start with the revenue. You can see in 22, we're going down to 4.942. That's huge. And then of that 4.9, the biggest piece is the unrestricted state aid. We're just not getting the funding for it through the state foundation. So they're just doing it a different way. Now the next piece you'll see is also a large piece because it is the open enrollment in. We used to have a different account code that I would have to use for any open enrollment that come in, and that number there is really it's going away, and it's coming through as just state funding. So that number's kind of going away, so that makes it looks a little bit different. This here is like my overall revenue, just at a glance with a chart, because I kind of like to visually look at it that way also. You can see in 22 how all the revenue has gone down. And my percentages on the right is the graph. It's changed a little bit too. It's just visually to me, you can just see that everything's went down. Now, let's talk a little bit about the expenses. Same thing with 22. You'll see how it's went down tremendously. And the biggest area that it's went down in 22 is tuition, which is exactly what we talked about earlier. The open enrollment, community school scholarships, none of that's coming through anymore. I love that piece, honestly, because then it makes it more clear. Because at one point we were getting funded for 3,600 kids, but 600 kids were going out. It's just a clearer picture. Here's here's what we're gonna get funded for, which is every kid that's sitting in the seat here at the district. I always want to show, I wanna show this chart too. You can see how the expenses have gone down in '22. But one thing I always, just is very important to me is that the one thing we should do is between 75 and 80% should always be for salaries and benefits. And we are at that 80.8%. So we are doing what we're supposed to do, because the majority of our expenses should be salary and benefits. And that's where it's at this point. This piece here is, I think, the most important piece. It's right down here. You'll see, I don't know if I can get down in here, and it's not letting me. There it is. This $828,772 negative. That means I'm deficit spending. I don't like the deficit spend. I really don't. It's just not a good reflection, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I felt like at one point we had, why we gave raises to staff and things is I felt we did have a pretty high balance. And sometimes the state penalizes you for that. So, the last negotiations, it did take a toll on, just going to tell you the truth, on our deficit spending. But we still have $7,422,000, if you look at that number underneath. It's not critical at this point. I'm not, I always work really hard on this year and the next year. Whatever the buy-in budget is what I really work hard on. The other 3 years are more history, just looking at history and putting in history numbers. What I did think was a positive was, let's take a look at your other two forms. It should have May at the top, and then the other one should have November at the top. So I kind of wanted you to compare those two where the highlighted areas are. Here's what I was able to do. From May, I projected I didn't know what's going to happen with the Cup Patterson or this fair school, funding. I didn't know. We went from overspending 1.891 to 828,000. That is tremendous. And how did I come about that? I have utilized our grants. We have received so many grants and have utilized them to the fullest. Here's some of the ways I've been able to save, or we've been able to save. Tenured teaching staff has transferred into the ESSER paid positions, which in turn saved the district general fund money. Moved some maintenance supplies into ESSER for anything related to supplies for cleaning for COVID. Moved some safety-related purchase services and supplies to ESSER to help with the demand of safety. Moved positions we have hired, including permanent sub-teachers, permanent sub-custodians, resource officer, social worker, dean of students, into ESSER until the funds are depleted. Moved contracted services into ESSER for example, technology support. Because of the Digital Academy, I felt like it fell under COVID because they're doing the online learning. I moved also capital expenses. We purchased a lot of equipment for maintenance, cleaning, air quality upgrades, chillers, which in turn saved the general fund. And then we also purchased, we used another grant for technology, which is the broadband grant, which we bought a lot of Chromebooks. And then also we just applied for 2 different E-rate sets, which is more capital equipment. So that's how I was able to show this million here. And I'm not going to say that there could be something additional next year too. We don't know. We don't know what's coming. There could be more. There could be not. Could I make some changes for next year? Maybe. It just depends on what happens this year with the ESSER money. We have hired 30-some people. I don't remember exactly how many. 36 people to help with the learning loss, because this ESSER money is all about preventing COVID and learning loss. And that's why we've tried to utilize every penny of this.
The capital you spent from ESSER, would we be buying those capital items anyway?
Yes, we would have.
So that is just a net saving for us.
It is, yes.
So if we were gonna buy them anyway.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I think that that's kind of why I wanted that we pulled some things out of general fund to save it and use the ESSER funds while we've got it. I think that's, important to utilize every grant that we have. And honestly, we've got a few, other grants too, like, they call them ARP, but it's something to do with the federal, something additional for special education, something additional for the homeless, something, so on top of ESSER, we've got a few little smaller grants that we've pulled and utilized those to the best. And I think that's what's helped us save this close to $1 million this
Oh,
year.
yeah, look from
Yes, yeah,
one point eight to
yeah,
eight,
it's huge,
that's really good.
yeah.
I just, maybe, it's one of the things people would bought
We would have,
anyway.
yeah, yeah.
Now, some of these programs with the homeless and that, were those programs we were gonna have anyway also?
Yeah, and actually this year, we got homeless in a different way. It comes through the federal. And it's never done that before. It's always been a state grant. And it's went through the federal this year, and it was a lot more. And then just like 2 weeks ago, we got a second round of it. So we know now that we can pay, I think, for 3 years, Tabitha. And then probably what they'll do is go back to the old way of doing the homeless.
That was the
Which is
McKinney
not quite
Vento
as much,
grant.
yeah.
We
But yeah,
lost
the
that
McKinney
grant.
Vento, yeah. So I think that's what's helped save this million. Now, don't get me wrong, we gotta continue to monitor everything, watch everything. Again, like I said earlier, I don't really like to deficit spend but I feel like we gained a lot here, in the $1 million from May to, that's huge to me. Slows things down. We're really not in critical until now we're going out to fiscal year 25. So where before it was, really we'd be looking at it probably in 23, what we would have to do. And I think we're in better shape now. And it could, one thing I think that we need to make sure that you guys know is the next biennium could be better for us. I've seen some projections and it looks like it is. But you can't count on it until you actually see it. So I didn't put anything in there because I don't want to put a false hope in there, that
what-
we will and we won't.
What things are driving that? Are you,
I think it's going to be, just like I had said earlier about the state piece of it, right now they're basing it on 19's numbers. So I think we've increased enrollment. So I think when we get the new funding for 24 or whatever it is, I think the numbers will be up and that will give us more money. Because right now we're getting $7,200 per kid. So I think that would give us a little bit more money. I guess we'll see, time will tell. But I do, if we happen to, I did hear just a little buzz that the president's wanting to give additional funds. So we'll see. I mean, that's been a couple months ago and I haven't seen anything yet. But, that's what I plan on doing, is utilizing the grants to the best that I can because they'll be short-lived. And then therefore that offsets, the general fund. And I feel like we've done what we're supposed to do with this ESSER money, which is we've hired all of these instructional staff and aides and bus aides, whatever, to help with the learning loss. And we've done the right thing. Now, not all schools are doing that. They're supplementing their general fund, and I feel like we've done the right thing with it. And it has helped the general fund a little bit, not like the full force, but we just have to keep on track. The biggest thing, like I was telling you earlier, was 80% is salary and benefits. We just can't continue to hire staff if we want to stay on a budget, because I didn't put any additional staff other than what we have right now in the forecast. So doesn't mean if we get a grant, which that's happened before, we get a grant and we can hire a couple people. That's what we did with this IDEA, special education. We hired a teacher and 2 aides. So we try to utilize that the best that we can. Now, in 25, 25, we really have to, I put back in there that we were keeping some of the people. that we've hired. But that'll be very critical, on just not, because I know at the beginning, we talked about this, that these positions were temporary. Now, maybe something could come into play before then, and, you know, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it will be very critical to, you know, keep that in place, to not to rehire everyone back, because we won't be able to afford it. I did put a number in that I felt was, looking at the positions that I felt comfortable with. We can change that even in May if we know something different. But other than that, like I said, I feel like we've done a good job with going from 1.8 to 8. That's helped. We are still deficit spending, but we do have a cash balance.
I think the other thing is the scholarship programs. Those are killing us. They're just killing us. We lost 90 kindergartners this year,
Yeah.
and it's because of the scholarship. So right now, CPS and CMS are both ed choice schools, and that's based on report card data.
Right.
So, and CMS, you don't get that much because there's really nowhere else for them to go, but we're losing them at CPS. So, you know, obviously, we're trying to get the primary school out of the ed choice status. Hopefully, we will for next school year. The other thing, though, we have basically put a spreadsheet together of all those kids that have left, and we have put together questions, so we're going to start calling all of them. And just finding out, you know, what could we do to make you want to consider coming here? What made you choose to go to, you know, a private school? Just to kind of gather some information. So we'll try to get that done by January 1st. There are 90 families in there. But that still is a big concern, even though that money doesn't, it shakes out differently. I don't want us to forget that we are losing kids to ed choice because of the report card issues there.
Yeah, that would help our,
You know, the expenses, it's great that, you know, we're down 5 million in that. Just explain how we're saving money on that. I'm not quite sure how that.
on the expenses are down because now we don't have open enrollment. And open enrollment would normally come in through the forecast as a deduction. Open enrollment's not there, community school's not there now. The scholarships like,
Autism, John
autism,
Peterson.
yeah, people, they're not there as an expense any longer because now it's all going to them. So my open enrollment that would always be an expense, those kids are going to Zane, you know, they're getting the funding for them.
Right.
Zane Trace is, Unioda is, so we don't have to show that anymore as an expense. So now truly in our buildings are kids that are our kids, and we're getting funded for every kid in a seat. That's how it's working now. Before it used to work, we got enrollment for 3,600 kids, for instance. And out of that, some flowed out as an expense to the surrounding schools because of the open enrollment. We don't have that now.
I just don't, you know, I'm missing something here with,
It was a shell game designed by the
It was.
state of
It was
Ohio that
Yeah.
showed you had, we'll just use magic numbers here, 3,900 students, and we're going to fund you for 3,900 students on this side of the line.
But we're
But
gonna take away.
over here, we're going to take it right back away from you, but it's showing it as an expense, and it's showing that you got $10 million when you, in actuality, only got 7. And it was just their shell game.
I think what I never liked about the whole process was we would get funded for $4,600 for those 3,600 kids.
Yeah.
Well, when we sent the enrollment out, when it was out like an expense, we lost 6,000. So I didn't like that piece of it because we
Oh,
really
okay.
wasn't,
Well,
you
that
see
make-
what does that make
Now
sense?
it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha.
That was,
It was a hidden factor that they charged us
Right, yeah.
without saying it, really.
Right,
Right.
They didn't say it, but they charged us for
So,
it.
yeah, we don't have to pay for them leaving. We
No.
don't get the money, but we
do
don't
not.
have to
We
pay.
don't have to pay
Yeah.
for them. We don't get the money, but we
Well,
don't
that
have to pay
makes
for
perfect
them.
And we don't have to pay more than we got.
Right, which I understand
Which they
not
were
getting
doing.
the money, but we shouldn't have to have paid
I get it.
more
Yep.
too.
Nope, we really
That was
seen
a double-edged sword that
it
was.
was horrible. Now, what they always told me at the state was, well, those people are here in the city and we're getting their real estate taxes. Now, does that make up for the $2,000? I don't know what people pay for real estate taxes, honestly. Maybe it does.
I don't think there's very many of them that are doing that.
But that's what the realization of the whole thing was.
That was
is
the,
that they felt
that was
like,
their
yeah,
explanation.
only 4,600, but you're sending 6, but that difference is what they pay for real estate taxes.
That was their feel-good explanation for the shell game they were playing in front of you.
Yeah, and honestly, this now is just, to me, is clean cut, easy.
Well, it's true.
It's what we need to work hard on our enrollment and to keep the kids coming, and every kid that does is gonna help the district, and it's gonna be a lot easier, truthfully.
Deb, with the special ed kids that are open and rolled out and we get billed excess cost, does that end now, or does that still?
No, that's still,
Because that does affect us.
yes, it does.
Okay,
That
so we
actually,
still get billed
one,
for that.
yeah, I
Okay.
still have to do that, yeah.
Okay.
We tried real hard, to get that taken out also, but they wouldn't take that out. And that truly cost us about $250,000-$300,000 for the excess cost, so that's still in there.
Okay.
Um,
Does everybody know what that is, excess cost?
Go ahead and explain it.
So if a student with a disability is enrolled in UNIOTA and say they need an aide, and they need an aide on the bus, they need a nurse, all of those things, if those services are above and beyond what they get for that kiddo, then that comes back to us. They bill us for those services, and we do the same.
We
So
do,
then we have
yeah.
to reimburse them for those costs that go above and beyond what that kiddo would get under their disability category.
Okay.
So it's about 250 to 300,000.
least.
But they make that determination too, don't they? I mean, they decide what the kiddo's getting. I mean, normally justification-wise
Yeah.
is correct. But if a neighboring district has one of our kiddos and they decide they need an aide and a nurse, we don't have much say in it.
Well, we're supposed to.
We paid for a nurse
Well, they're
and an
supposed to
aide.
invite us to the meetings. They're not great about that. And technically, if they don't invite us to the meeting and I don't sign off on it as a special ed director, they really shouldn't be able to bill us, but there's
But
no
I've
way to
challenged
track.
that.
any-
Yeah, and I've
it's
challenged
very
that
difficult,
several
yeah.
times, and they still give it to the person.
Yeah.
They always give it to the
Yeah.
school that had the services.
And you don't want to deny a child what they need, if
No.
they're that disabled and they need
Correct.
that. But it's helpful if we know. But they're not always great about that.
Well, and there's a category called catastrophic also, which is just our students with special needs that have several services. We can turn in for that. And I do know, I read that there's going to be more money there. It used to be that here's the most that you could get, and there's going to be more money this year for it. So we usually, I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's usually around 35,000 is what we get every year, and that's huge. It used to be they didn't even do it, and if they give us more this year, that could be really good, because we do have some
We have some kids out
Yeah,
at
we do.
Pioneer that have full-time nurses with them that have to ride the vans.
PT, OT.
Yeah, all of that, and that's typically what it is, kids that have just a lot of services.
Okay.
Overall, we've slowed it down a little bit, so that's
Well, the
good.
new funding formula is probably the best attempt to be accurate and
It is.
fair to districts.
It definitely is. It's what's actually here and who we're educating, and I like that piece of it. It makes it simpler to understand.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Thanks, Deb.
I did have one question.
Yeah, sure.
The ESSER funds,
Yes,
where does that fall on this sheet here?
Not on here at
It's
all.
not on there at
Nope.
all.
not on there at all. This here, my 5-year forecast is always just general fund money.
Okay,
ESSER is a
yeah,
Is a
so
different
that's,
fund.
we're keeping that out of there and,
yes, yep.
do you have a breakout of the ESSER funds on, you mentioned how we've used it on,
Oh, yeah,
supplemental
I have it.
positions.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
I have, there's ESSER 2 funds and there's an ESSER 3. The ESSER 2 funds is split out in 2 years.
Yeah,
And then the ESSER 3 funds, actually, some of it, I'm gonna do that for 3 years. So yes, I have a spreadsheet. I really watch that because, it has to fall within the guidelines of what you can spend it for. And, if a person goes from single coverage to family coverage, insurance, believe it or not, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So I monitor that really.
Could-
But sure, I can send it
could
to
we
you.
have like a breakout of, once those funds are gone, the positions or the,
We have,
um,
yeah.
whatever it be that needs to carry forward, that would have to be paid out of the general fund.
Yeah.
Is there any way we could have like a projection on that?
That's Debbie's deal.
That's a tough one. We have everything on there, so maybe what we do is send that out. And a lot of the, you know, you're gonna, like she's saying, look at aides, you're gonna look at, we put a lot of additional reading support people in, those are the folks
Contracted
we'd be talking
services.
about.
Yeah,
I think the preschool that we have in there now is certainly the one we're gonna have to talk about, you know,
Yeah.
continuing forward. But yeah, we can do that, and
my thought was just to forecast what additional general fund dollars are
I
gonna have to.
did do that some. I did it because I wasn't for sure what Deb wanted, so I wanted to make sure that I felt comfortable with the positions. And I think I allowed, if you can see here, if you go out to year 3, you can see kind of a big difference there. I put some money in. Now, whether I put enough, I don't know that part yet. Deb will have to tell me which
Yeah.
positions
Okay.
is critical to keep and moving forward and.
then we may not know that till next year.
I mean, we
Yeah.
may not, you
It's
know,
just-
honestly, and
yeah.
things could change
Yeah.
for next
Yeah.
year, you know?
What the impact the position has
Yeah,
Yeah,
and what the desired target is.
right.
And
And
how
that's
much-
gonna be the balancing act for the board and for the administration, is to decide, are those positions vital to keep? And then
Exactly.
how are we going to fund that
Yeah.
position from there forward? Because like you said, a nurse and aide it's really not, yeah, we need them, no, we don't. It's what that particular kiddo deserves at the
Yeah.
time. And, I mean, if a kiddo deserves to have an aide or a nurse, they're gonna have an aide or a nurse. Because otherwise, the backside of that is the lawsuit,
Yeah.
and we don't want any of that either.
Well, and one thing I took in consideration, just thinking about it too, was there's a few teachers that are out of ESSER funds that are retiring. So, you know, you know what I mean? There's some things that we have to factor in, and I don't know that I'm at a point that I would know 100%, although I did want to put something in because it was unrealistic if I didn't put something in. And so I did put something in, for the classified versus certified out there in that year that, you know, going away. Or who knows, we may get another grant. I mean, honestly, and could extend it another year or 2. We just don't know that yet.
because I think the learning loss issue, it's huge everywhere across the nation. And I think they're gonna figure out pretty quick that it's gonna take more than 3 years to close that gap with a lot of kids.
That was a huge conversation at the conference this year,
Mhm.
was learning loss and how it affects.
Yeah,
So-
especially the kids online. Now, we didn't have that many kids online compared to a lot of school districts last year and, you know, the year before, but the learning loss it's significant. And you can't close it through a summer, you know, offering summer services. I think the people we have in place right now are working very hard to, you know, close that gap, but, I mean, Dana, you can talk to it, and so could Jen. It's gonna take a while. Yeah.
I would hope that there'd be support all the way until that student graduates. Like, I mean, the setback is, it's exponential after
Yeah.
time, over time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would hope that the funding would sustain at least through, you know, what year was it, the 2020, those students
Yeah,
that
2020.
were
1920.
kindergartners, that
That's
I'd
it.
hope the money would keep coming in until they graduate.
You would hope.
But,
And it could very well, honestly, that we could, this is round 3 of ESSER. The first round was, honestly, it was more about
Cleaning
cleaning
supplies and-
supplies,
yeah.
masks, the little signs everywhere. That just went away like right now. But this second piece is about learning loss, and the third piece too is to extend that learning loss. And I think if they see things aren't turning around, I think that the government will, you know, give some more. When it will happen, I don't know. That's the piece, who knows? I don't know.
Well, and the mental health pieces are as significant
Huge.
as the academic loss.
Mhm.
And those are huge. And those are not things that get closed easily either. Which is, we've got a lot of stuff in ESSER for that too.
Yeah, so if we get additional funding, just gonna extend things out a little bit longer, which would be great. You know, instead of 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 to 6, you know, just, who knows? They're gonna let you get rid of these funds first. You spend these funds first before they'll even think about another one.
Any other questions? Thanks, Deb. Is there a motion to approve the 5-year forecast? I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Jeff seconds. Roll, please. Or is there any discussion? I'm sorry. Roll, please.
Mr. Hartmus?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Bonner?
Yes.
Mrs. Corzine?
Yes.
Mr. Dennis?
Yes.